A single drop of liquid gold transforms a page into a window to another world. Medieval illuminated manuscripts are more than just beautiful books. They are the pinnacle of art, faith, and knowledge from 1,000 years ago, painstakingly crafted by hand. Each one is a time capsule, sealed with vibrant colors, bizarre creatures, and profound secrets waiting to be unlocked. We are about to journey through 25 of the most iconic examples ever created. By the end, you will have met the artists, decoded the symbols, and uncovered the hidden stories that make these books eternal. We will discover why a queen cherished a prayer book so small it fit in her palm, and what bizarre scenes of everyday life were sketched in the margins of a holy text. What kind of story do you think a book made of solid gold would tell to find the heart of this story? We must travel to a windswept island off the coast of Scotland. Around the year 800, on the island of Iona, a group of monks began a project of staggering ambition. They were creating the Book of Kells, a Latin copy of the 4 Gospels that would become the most famous medieval manuscript in the world. Its very existence is a miracle of survival. Iona was a beacon of learning, but that made it a target. Viking raiders descended upon the monastery, their longships slicing through the cold North Atlantic waters. In the face of this terror, the monks fled, likely taking their precious, unfinished book with them to a new sanctuary in Kells, Ireland. It weathered centuries of turmoil that would have destroyed a lesser object. What did these Vikings almost steal from the world? Open its pages today, safely housed at Trinity College, Dublin, and you are met with a visual symphony. Some pages, known as carpet pages, are covered in breathtaking abstract designs. They look less like art and more like woven tapestries of liquid metal and gemstones, patterns of such intricate mathematical complexity that they seem to hum with a hidden divine order. Then there is the Chi-Rho page, perhaps the most famous illumination in history. It marks the beginning of the story of Christ in the Gospel of Matthew, exploding the sacred name into a vibrant universe of color. Celtic knots spiral into infinity, and fantastical animals peek from every curl and corner. A single letter becomes a portal to an entire world, and here lies the first great mystery of the Book of Kells. We do not know the names of the artists who painted these pages. Were they 4 master scribes, as some suggest, or the work of a single, unparalleled genius? The book itself holds the clues, but it does not give up its secrets easily. Every serpentine creature, every impossibly complex knot, is believed to be a symbol. This was not a book meant to be simply read. It was designed to be meditated upon, a spiritual exercise where the lavish decoration was a path to understanding the divine. The chaos of the world was kept at bay by the perfect, ordered beauty of the sacred word, a beauty so intense it could feel like a form of armor. While the Book of Kells sings with the chorus of many hands, the Lindisfarne Gospels are the profound prayer of a single man. Its story begins on a holy island off the northeast coast of England, a place of windswept beauty and deep solitude known as Lindisfarne. Around the year 715, a bishop named Eadfrith began a monumental task. He would create a masterpiece, not for fame, but as a personal act of devotion for his spiritual father, St. Cuthbert, who had died decades earlier. Imagine the quiet of the scriptorium, the scratch of the quill, the patient grinding of pigments. For years, Eadfrith worked alone, his faith poured into every line. The art he created is a perfect fusion of worlds, a visual language that tells a story of cultural connection. He wove together the Celtic love for endless spirals and intricate knots with the fierce, energetic animal interlace of the Germanic people. But then he added a third, revolutionary ingredient, the classical style of the Mediterranean. You can see this in his stunning portraits of the 4 evangelists. Each saint sits framed by an architectural motif that looks like a Roman archway, a window into a more solid, classical world. Yet around that arch teems a vibrant ecosystem of Celtic birds and serpentine beasts. It is as if he built a chapel from Roman stone, only to have the local wilderness joyfully reclaim its walls. The most breathtaking displays of his genius are the cross-carpet pages. Just before each gospel, a full page is dedicated to a magnificent cross. woven into a tapestry of such detail that the eye can get lost for hours. These are not simple decorations. They are meditative labyrinths, intended to prepare the reader's mind and soul for the sacred words that follow. The cross becomes a doorway, and the intricate patterns are the path one walks to reach a higher state of understanding. Centuries after Eadfrith's hand stilled, another vital layer was added to the book. In the 10th century, a priest named Aldred penned a direct translation between the lines of the original Latin. He wrote in Old English, the language of the common people. This simple act of glossing transformed the book from a remote object of beauty into a living, breathing document. It is, in fact, the oldest surviving translation of the Gospels into English. Because of Aldred, the Lindisfarne Gospels is not just a pinnacle of art, it is a foundational stone of the English language itself, capturing a moment when the Word of God first began to speak in a tongue that would one day circle the globe. This book is both a solitary prayer and a communal bridge, a silent, gorgeous monument that found its voice across the centuries. Yet a very different kind of beauty was being crafted far from the isolated monasteries of the British Isles. In the elegant courts of 15th century France, a book was being made not just for prayer, but for the sheer, breathtaking display of worldly power and divine grace. This is the Très Riches Heures du Duc de Berry, a book of hours that stands as the ultimate achievement of the international Gothic style. Its pages shimmer with a delicate, luminous quality, but its most revolutionary feature is found at the very front. There lies a calendar, a simple list of days transformed into a panoramic window into an entire medieval world. Each month is paired with a stunning miniature painting. On one side, we see the labors of the peasants, the relentless, grounding rhythm of the year. In February, villagers huddle by a fire inside a snow-covered cottage, their breath visible in the frigid air. In June, workers scythe golden hay in a field with the sprawling skyline of Paris rising in the distance. But above each of these scenes of toil rises one of the Duke's own magnificent castles, depicted with architectural precision. These are not just pretty backgrounds, they are powerful, constant reminders of the feudal order, a world where the aristocracy literally looked down from their stone palaces upon the people whose labor sustained their entire way of life. The creators of this vision were three young brothers, Paul, Herman, and Jean de Limburg. They were artistic prodigies, and the Duke of Berry, one of the greatest art patrons of his age, gave them access to his immense wealth and his spectacular libraries. They poured this inspiration onto the vellum, creating scenes of unprecedented realism and emotional depth. Their figures have a new grace and individuality, their landscapes a true sense of space and atmosphere. But then, in 1416, a tragedy struck. Both the Duke and the Limburg brothers all died, most likely from an outbreak of plague. The magnificent book was left unfinished, a silent, beautiful ruin. For decades, it sat incomplete until new artists were commissioned to finish the work. You can see the subtle shift in style on its pages, a layered history of different hands and different eras all bound together. This book is more than a prayer book. It is a time machine, offering us an unparalleled, vivid snapshot of a society frozen in time, from the chill in a peasant's cottage to the glittering spires of a duke's dream. But not all royal books were grand displays of earthly power. Some were whispers of pure devotion, created for a single pair of eyes. In the 1320s, a master artist named Jean Pucelle completed a prayer book for Jeanne-d'evreux, the Queen of France. This was not a large, ceremonial volume. It was a tiny, exquisite object, small enough to be held in the palm of your hand, designed for the Queen's most private moments of prayer. Its scale makes its artistic genius even more astonishing. Pucelle chose a revolutionary technique known as grisaille. He painted the entire book in a spectrum of gray tones, using only subtle washes of color to accent the lips and cheeks of his figures. This monochrome palette creates a breathtaking effect. The illustrations look less like flat paintings and more like miniature sculptures carved from moonlit stone, with deep shadows and brilliant highlights that give them a dramatic, three-dimensional life. It is an art of profound elegance and restraint, a quiet drama unfolding in shades of silver and shadow. Yet if you look to the bottom of these pages, the basta page, you discover a world of playful contradiction. Here, In the margins of the most solemn religious scenes, Pucelle sketched a parade of whimsical and often humorous figures. Mischievous monkeys mimic the pious gestures of the saints above them. Scenes from popular fables play out next to depictions of the life of Christ. A grinning grotesque might poke its head from a floral border. This is the captivating paradox of medieval piety. While the main image guided the queen's soul toward heaven, the margins acknowledged the earthy, humorous, and utterly human world she lived in. These little drawings were not disrespectful. They were a release valve, a reminder that faith and laughter could coexist. The Hours of Jeanne-d'evreux is a supreme example of Parisian courtly art, a jewel of refinement. But more than that, it is a deeply personal object, a silent witness to the intimate spiritual life of a queen, a book where sacred drama and playful humanity live together on the very same page. Gold was the color of emperors, and in the 9th century, no one understood this better than Charlemagne's grandson, Charles the Bald. His imperial vision was made manifest in a book of such staggering opulence that its very name, the Codex-aureus of Saint Emmeram, means the Golden Book. To even touch its pages was to touch power. The manuscript was crafted not on ordinary white vellum, but in a sea of purple-dyed parchment, a color so expensive and so explicitly linked to Roman and Byzantine emperors that its use was a political statement in itself. Upon this royal canvas, the words of the Gospels were inscribed almost entirely in inks of gold and silver. When the light hit its pages, the book would have shimmered, a radiant object proclaiming that its owner was divinely chosen to rule. The most powerful of these golden pages is a full-page miniature showing Charles the Bald himself, enthroned in majestic splendor. He is not depicted as a humble supplicant, but as a Christ-like sovereign, receiving the homage of personified provinces of his empire. This was more than a portrait. It was a bold declaration of his divine right, a visual argument that his authority came directly from God. The artist surrounded the emperor with the symbols of classical learning, linking his reign to the lost glory of Rome. This was the very heart of the Carolingian Renaissance, a conscious and deliberate revival of Roman art, architecture, and scholarship that Charles's grandfather, Charlemagne, had championed. The Golden Book is perhaps the ultimate physical manifestation of that ambitious program. It was an attempt to weld together imperial power, ancient wisdom, and Christian faith into a single glorious object. Every golden letter was a brick in the rebuilding of a new Roman Empire, one founded not in Rome, but in the heart of a newly Christianized Europe. This manuscript was his empire in miniature, a perfect fusion of piety and politics, designed to dazzle the eye and command the soul. While the golden books of emperors were made for a single hand, another kind of masterpiece was created for an entire community to share. In the great Winchester Cathedral during the 12th century, a project began that was so ambitious it would never truly be finished. This was the Winchester-Bible, a monumental Romanesque giant whose very size was a testament to its purpose. Imagine a book that stands nearly 2 feet tall, its pages made from the skins of over 250 calves. This was not a personal object. It was a communal anchor for one of England's most powerful monastic communities, designed to be placed on a massive lectern and read aloud during divine services. Its words were meant to be heard by everyone, and its art was meant to be seen from a distance. The most stunning features of this colossal book are its historiated initials. These are not just decorated letters, they are entire narrative worlds contained within a single giant character. At the start of each biblical book, the opening letter explodes into a vibrant, emotionally charged scene. Within the curve of a P or the body of an B, you might find the story of David and Goliath playing out with raw, theatrical force. The figures are not static or posed. They leap, they gesticulate, they contort their bodies in a whirlwind of action. This dynamic energy is the signature of one particular artist, a man known to us only as the master of the leaping figures. His style is unmistakable. His characters seem to defy gravity, their draperies swirling around them as if caught in a spiritual wind. There is a palpable sense of drama in every scene he painted, a raw emotional power that makes the ancient stories feel immediate and visceral. But this Bible is also a testament to collaboration over many decades. you can see the distinct hands of at least 6 different artists working on its pages. Some favored a more classical, serene style, while others, like the master of the leaping figures, embraced this new, expressive energy. The project was so vast that work stopped and started for years. Some pages were fully painted in brilliant color, while others were left with only the delicate ink outlines, a ghostly promise of the splendor that was intended. This unfinished state is strangely revealing. It lets us see the very process of creation, the different personalities of the artist frozen in time. The Winchester Bible is more than a book. It is a cathedral of vellum and pigment, a collaborative dream that captures the fierce ambition and deep faith of a community striving to create something truly monumental for their God. Yet another book, created for a king, would one day tell a story far grander than its original purpose. The Morgan-Crusader-Bible is a thunderous epic without a single word of its own text. Crafted in Paris around 1240, likely for the sainted King Louis IX, its nearly 100 pages are a relentless cascade of images. This is a picture book of the Old Testament, but the world it depicts is not that of ancient Israel. Here, biblical heroes like David and Joshua are clad head to toe in gleaming 13th century French plate armor. They besiege towers that are unmistakably European crusader castles, and their battles unfold under banners and heraldry that would have been instantly recognizable to any medieval knight. It is a complete transposition of sacred history into the visual language of contemporary chivalry and holy war. The original pages were left entirely without words, a conscious choice that made its powerful narrative universally legible to any noble or knight, regardless of their literacy. This was the Bible as a knight would have dreamed it, a divine sanction for the crusading ideals of its royal patron, but the book's own life story was only just beginning. Its incredible journey turned it from a Christian emblem into a truly global object. Centuries after its creation, the Bible traveled east, far into the Islamic world. Here, a Persian Shah, fascinated by its artistry, had Persian inscriptions added directly onto the illustrations, explaining the scenes from an Islamic perspective, which also reveres many of these Old Testament prophets. Later still, a Jewish owner added their own layer, inscribing the pages in Judeo-Persian, a dialect of Persian written in Hebrew script. A single page can now show a scene of Christian knights, labeled with a Persian description, owned by a Jewish scholar. The book had been adopted, reinterpreted, and cherished by 3 different faiths. It was no longer just a Crusader Bible, it was a bridge between worlds, a silent witness to the unexpected conversations that can happen across the deepest cultural divide. How does a book of war become a messenger of connection? A world of chivalry and scripture could feel distant from the soil, but one English knight wanted his prayer book to reflect the land he ruled. The luttrell-psalter, created in Lincolnshire around 1340, is a psalter that has captivated historians not for its holy words, but for the riot of life teeming at the bottom of its pages. Commissioned by the wealthy landowner Sir Geoffrey Luttrell, its most astonishing feature is an encyclopedia of the everyday, meticulously painted in the margins. Here in the Basta page, the sacred text is grounded by the raw, bustling reality of the 14th century English countryside. We see peasants plowing fields with heavy oxen, their faces etched with effort. Women are shown baking bread in communal ovens, their sleeves rolled up as they knead the dough. This is not an idealized vision, it is a document of labor, a snapshot of the very society that supported the knightly class. But the artist's imagination did not stop at realism. Sprinkled among these scenes of toil are moments of pure whimsy and bizarre invention. A man draws his bow to shoot a bird pecking at a tree. A woman, her expression one of comic frustration, swats at a goose with a stick. There are scenes of music and dance, of villagers playing rough games, and of fantastical hybrid creatures that are part human, part beast. A rabbit dressed as a knight might joust with a snail, and grotesque figures contort themselves in the borders. Why fill a holy book with such earthly, and sometimes comical, details? For Sir Geoffrey, these scenes were a form of social accounting. They visually represented the world he governed, the productive estate that was the source of his wealth and status. They were a celebration of the orderly, rhythmic cycle of rural life that sustained his entire way of being, yet the humor and fantasy suggest something more. They reveal a medieval mindset that saw no strict separation between the spiritual and the mundane, the pious and the playful. The world was an interconnected whole where God's grace was present in the harvest, and the devil could be glimpsed in a grotesque grin. The luttrell-psalter is our most vivid window into the lives of the common people, a priceless social document that tells us not only what they did, but also how they laughed, dreamed, and saw their own world. The clash of two worlds is captured in the very parchment of the great Canterbury Psalter. This 12th century book of Psalms began its life in the scriptorium of Christ Church, Canterbury, a project by English monks working in the robust and energetic Romanesque tradition. Their art was characterized by bold outlines, intense colors, and figures that seemed to vibrate with a spiritual force, a style deeply rooted in the Anglo-Saxon world. But the book's creation was interrupted, and when work resumed nearly a century later, a new set of hands took over. French artists, steeped in the emerging Gothic aesthetic, arrived to complete the manuscript. The result is a single volume that serves as a direct artistic conversation, and sometimes a confrontation between two distinct cultures. You can see this dialogue unfold with startling clarity on pages where an English initial, thick with interlaced beasts and vibrant patterning, sits directly opposite a French illustration of a saint rendered with graceful, flowing lines and a serene, naturalistic face. The English work feels ancient and powerful, while the French art feels modern and elegant. This side-by-side comparison is no accident of history. It is the direct cultural consequence of the Norman conquest of 1066, a political event that reverberated through the arts for generations. The Psalter physically embodies the slow, complex fusion of Anglo-Saxon and Norman French traditions. It shows us that the conquering culture did not simply erase the old ways. Instead, over time, the two styles began to influence one another, creating a new hybrid English art. The book itself became a site of negotiation, where Old English energy met new French sophistication on the common ground of vellum. Here, the story of a nation's transformation is not told in a chronicle, but illustrated in gold leaf and colored ink, a permanent record of how beauty can emerge from the most profound collision. Purple was the imperial color of the ancient world, a hue so potent it spoke of emperors and divine authority. The Vienna Genesis, created in the 6th century, is one of the very oldest illuminated Bibles to survive, and it wears this royal identity in its very skin. Its pages are not the creamy white of calfskin, but a rich, deep purple, a dye so precious and expensive that its use was reserved for the most significant of state documents and religious texts. Upon this majestic background, the scribes did not write with simple black ink. The words of the Book of Genesis were carefully inscribed in shimmering silver, a metal that would have gleamed against the dark parchment like stars in a twilight sky. To hold this book was to hold a piece of the imperial court itself, an object of staggering luxury that transformed Scripture into a tangible symbol of power and piety. The visual storytelling within is just as revolutionary. Instead of placing illustrations in the margins or within large initials, the artists of the Vienna Genesis created a continuous narrative strip that runs along the bottom of many pages. These miniatures are not stiff or formal. They possess a classical fluidity, a sense of motion and life that feels remarkably modern. Figures gesture with emotional urgency, and scenes from the lives of the patriarchs flow into one another with an almost cinematic rhythm. In one scene, Jacob dreams of a ladder reaching to heaven, the angels rendered with a swift, almost impressionistic brushstroke that captures the ethereal quality of the vision. In another, the story of Joseph unfolds with a dramatic intensity, his brothers casting him into a pit with gestures of raw betrayal. This is biblical illustration in its infancy, yet it displays a breathtaking narrative confidence. This masterpiece was almost certainly born in an imperial workshop, likely in the great capital of Constantinople or in the Syrian city of Antioch. It represents the pinnacle of late antique book production, a direct bridge between the naturalistic art of the Roman world and the symbolic language of the medieval one. The Vienna Genesis is more than a beautiful book. It is a crucial key for understanding how artists first began to translate the sacred stories of the Bible into a visual language, setting a template that would inspire illuminators for the next 1,000 years. What other ancient secrets might these purple pages hold? But the divine word was not the only story being told in the Middle Ages. A massive book from 14th century Germany, the Codex-Manuscripts, sings a very different song. This is the gross Heidelberger Liederhandschrift, a sprawling collection of secular love poetry known as Minnesang. Within its pages, the words of 140 poets are preserved, their verses celebrating the ideals of courtly love and chivalric virtue. Yet its true glory lies not in the text, but in the art. 137 full-page miniatures present us with an idealized gallery of these poets. Each one is portrayed not as a humble scribe, but as a paragon of knightly perfection. We see them clad in gleaming armor, tilting against opponents in brilliant jousts, or kneeling to offer their devotion to a noble lady. These are not realistic portraits. They are carefully constructed fantasies, designed to forge a visual mythology for an entire aristocratic class. A poet who may have been a minor nobleman is immortalized as the epitome of courage and refinement. This magnificent project was a commission for the Manus family, wealthy Zurich patricians with ambitions to climb the social ladder. By compiling this book and filling it with these heroic images, they were not just preserving poetry. They were buying their way into the very legend it portrayed. Owning this book was a powerful status symbol, a way to link their family name permanently to the most celebrated ideals of the age. The Codex Manus is a secular Bible of chivalry, a testament to how art could be used to craft an identity and cement a legacy, proving that in the medieval world, the pen and the paintbrush could be as powerful as the sword. While the Codex Manus celebrated the ideals of chivalry, another English book from the same era found its divine inspiration in the natural world unfolding just outside the monastery walls. The Sherborne Missal is a monumental book of staggering beauty and scale, the largest and most lavishly decorated late medieval missal to survive from England. Created in the early 1400s for the Benedictine monks of Sherborne Abbey, this was not a book for private prayer, but the central text for the Mass used daily at the high altar. Its sheer size was a proclamation of the abbey's importance and piety, a physical anchor for the most sacred rituals of the community. But open its pages, and you discover a world that goes far beyond standard liturgical scenes. Alongside depictions of saints and biblical events, blooms an exhaustive, vibrant encyclopedia of British wildlife. The margins are alive with birds, each one rendered with a naturalistic precision that feels centuries ahead of its time. A kingfisher, a flash of brilliant blue and orange, perches on a reed. A humble robin, identified by name, is painted with such careful observation you can almost hear its song. This is more than decoration, it is a celebration of creation itself, where the divine presence is seen as clearly in the flutter of a sparrow's wing as in the words of the Eucharist. This incredible project was the work of a brilliant collaboration between two named masters, a rare detail that brings us closer to the creators. The scribe, John Was, meticulously laid out the complex Latin text, while the illuminator, John Cypherwis, brought it to life with his breathtaking palette. Cypherwis did not just fill the space around the words, he integrated his art with the text in a dynamic dance. A capital letter might transform into the stem of a plant where birds nestle, and winding vines sprouting from the script would frame a scene of a monk at prayer. The Missal represents the absolute peak of English international Gothic art, a style that blended the elegant lines of French art with a distinctly English love for observed detail and decorative abundance. In its pages, the sacred and the everyday exist in perfect harmony, a final, glorious flowering of monastic art created just before the upheavals of the Reformation would change England forever. This book is a testament to a world where faith saw God's hand in every living creature, from the grandest saint to the smallest, named Sparrow. Before the Très Riches Heures defined his legacy, the Duke of Berry commissioned a different masterpiece from the Limburg brothers, a book that reveals their creative process in its most daring form. The Belles Heures is a more intimate book of hours, but its true innovation lies in 7 extraordinary picture cycles the artists inserted directly into the traditional prayers. These are not single illustrations. They are expansive, multi-scene narratives that unfold like a graphic novel, telling the dramatic life stories of saints such as Jerome, Catherine, and Bruno. One cycle might follow Saint Catherine through her scholarly debates, her mystical marriage, and finally her brutal martyrdom, all within a sequence of stunning miniatures. This was a radical departure. The artists were given the freedom to transform a personal prayer book into a portable gallery of sacred epic storytelling. The color palette they used is unforgettable, dominated by deep lapis, lazuli blues, radiant golds, and soft, ethereal pinks that give every scene a dreamlike clarity. To contain these complex stories, the brothers pioneered a brilliant visual technique. They framed their miniatures within delicate, Gothic architectural structures that look like the stone tracery of cathedral windows. These frames do more than just decorate. They act as physical compartments, cleverly dividing a single page into multiple moments in time. In the story of Saint Jerome, you might see the saint studying in his cell within one arched compartment, while right next to it, in an adjacent frame, he is shown pulling a thorn from a lion's paw. This allowed the Limburgs to guide the viewer's eye through a chronological story without ever losing the overall harmony of the page. The Belles Heures was essentially a creative laboratory for the young artist. It was in these pages that they experimented with narrative pacing, emotional expression, and architectural space, developing the revolutionary skills they would later use in the Très Riches Heures. This earlier book is the key to understanding their genius, a private showcase where they first learned how to build entire worlds within the confines of a single page. A different kind of imperial vision was taking shape deep within the Holy Roman Empire. The Codex-aureus, a gospel book created for Archbishop Egbert of Trier in the late 10th century, radiates a calm and commanding authority. Its art is not a whirlwind of action, but a solemn, spiritual procession. The figures that fill its pages possess a hieratic stillness, their wide eyes gazing out with an otherworldly intensity, their gestures formal and deliberate. This is art designed not to excite, but to awe, to draw the viewer into a state of reverent contemplation. The sacred stories are told with a new clarity and grandeur, most powerfully in the full page cycles illustrating the life of Christ. In scene after scene, from the Nativity to the Resurrection, the compositions are balanced and architectural, the figures draped in heavy, classical robes that seem to echo the art of a much older empire. This was not an accident. The artists of the Codex-aureus were looking directly to Byzantium, the surviving heir of Rome, consciously importing its imperial visual language to lend their own work an ancient and unquestionable legitimacy. This magnificent manuscript stands as a pinnacle of the Ottonian Renaissance, a brilliant but brief flowering of art and learning that sought to revive the glory of Charlemagne's empire under a new Saxon dynasty. It was a project of political theology as much as artistic renewal. By wrapping the Word of God in the visual trappings of Byzantine emperors, the book performed a crucial function. It visually reinforced the sacred alliance between church and state, showing the archbishop and the emperor as divinely ordained partners governing a Christian realm. Every serene figure, every golden halo, was a brick in the construction of a new spiritual empire, an assertion that God's order on earth was reflected in the unshakable hierarchy of its rulers. Gold leaf illuminates the face of Saint Benedict, his expression one of serene authority within the Ramsey Psalter. This English masterpiece, created in the late 10th century, is a perfect jewel of the Winchester style, a tradition known for its lush colors and breathtaking intricacy. Its most powerful pages are not marginal decorations, but full, framed miniatures that command your entire attention. One such page presents the crucifixion with a quiet, heartbreaking dignity. Christ on the cross is not shown in agonized suffering, but as a timeless, divine king, his head bowed in peaceful sacrifice. The emotional weight of the scene is contained within a rigid, golden frame, a visual representation of the divine order that governs even the greatest of sorrows. Opposite this sacred moment rests the portrait of the order's founder, Saint Benedict himself. He holds his rule, the book that organized Western monastic life, a direct link between the spiritual ideal and the physical object you are viewing. Every detail is rendered with a calligrapher's precision, from the energetic, swirling lines of the drapery to the lavish fields of gold that make the pages seem to emit their own heavenly light. This was not art for art's sake. The creation of such a luxurious psalter was a deliberate act of piety and power, intimately connected to the great monastic reform movement sweeping England at the time. Leaders like St. Dunstan were working to purify and unify monasteries under the strict, observant rule of St. Benedict. A book like the Ramsey Psalter was both a tool for this reform and a symbol of its success. It glorified God through its sheer beauty, yes, but it also served as a very public display of a specific monastery's wealth, devotion, and intellectual refinement. To own such a book was to announce that your house was at the very forefront of this spiritual renewal, a beacon of correct practice and divine favor. The shimmering gold on the page was both a prayer and a proclamation. While kings and monks commissioned books of breathtaking beauty, a very different kind of Bible was made for someone who simply wanted to understand the story. The holkham-bible-picture-book is a medieval comic strip, a vibrant, fast-paced narrative that translates the entire sweep of scripture into a sequence of lively, almost cartoonish drawings. Created in England around 1325, its pages are a rite of action, with captions written not in formal Latin, but in the everyday Anglo-Norman French of the wealthy upper classes. Each scene is a small, self-contained panel, designed for maximum clarity and immediate impact. You do not need to be a scholar to follow the story of Adam and Eve being tempted by a very chatty serpent, or to watch Noah's Ark bobbing on a sea filled with comically distressed animals. The art is not concerned with delicate shading or golden halos. It uses bold outlines, flat planes of color, and exaggerated gestures to move the plot forward with a direct storytelling energy. This approachability is its greatest strength. The artist fills the sacred stories with anachronistic but relatable details. Biblical kings wear medieval crowns and hold swords recognizable from any English battlefield. The walls of Jerusalem look suspiciously like the fortified castles of 14th century France. This was a deliberate choice, making the ancient tales feel immediate, relevant, and utterly familiar to its audience. And in the margins, just as in the more formal prayer books, a parallel world of the profane and the humorous unfolds. Grotesque creatures with oversized heads mock the solemn scenes. A monkey plays the bagpipes, while a fox preaches to a flock of obedient chickens. This bizarre marginalia acts as a kind of medieval laugh track, a release of tension that acknowledges the absurdity of the world even while telling its most sacred stories. The Holkham Bible was almost certainly made for a wealthy, literate layperson, someone with the means to own such a book, but perhaps not the deep theological training of a cleric. It represents a profound shift in religious practice, a move towards personal devotion that happened outside the walls of the monastery. Here, the Word of God was no longer locked in a dead language or hidden behind complex symbolism. It was laid bare in pictures and a living tongue, a visual sermon anyone could follow. This book is a testament to a growing hunger for direct access to the divine narrative, a hunger that would eventually reshape the spiritual landscape of Europe. The Grands-Heures was the Duke of Berry's cathedral of a prayer book, a volume of such immense scale it demanded to be seen from across a chapel. Where the Très Riches Heures was a jewel box of worldly color, this book embraced a more solemn and majestic aesthetic. Its vast pages are dominated by an elegant austerity, with illustrations rendered primarily in stark grisaille and precise ink drawings. This monochrome palette, punctuated only by touches of color and brilliant gold leaf, creates a dramatic sculptural effect as if the figures were carved from marble and shadow. The power of this book, however, culminates in its most personal and public images. Two breathtaking full-page miniatures show the Duke himself, not hunting or feasting, but in his most vulnerable and devout posture. He kneels at a prie-dieu, deep in prayer, his rich robes pooling around him, but he is not alone. In one image, St. Andrew presents him to the Virgin and Child. In its companion, St. John the Baptist performs the same sacred duty. These are not simple portraits, they are meticulously staged spiritual audiences. The Duke, one of the most powerful men in Europe, is shown being ushered into the direct presence of the divine by the most prestigious of holy intermediaries. This was the ultimate fusion of personal piety and political theater. The sheer size of the book meant it was not for private contemplation, but for ceremonial display, likely used by a chaplain during grand services within the Duke's own chapels. When it was opened on a massive lectern, every courtier and visiting dignitary would witness these images. They saw a man whose earthly authority was so great that it granted him a visual passport to heaven's court. In the Grand Heuress, Jeanne-d'evreux-prayer did not just own a book, he built a monument where his power and his soul were permanently and publicly intertwined. The dazzling gold of imperial books and the sprawling scenes of biblical epics represent one kind of treasure, but some of the most profound manuscripts illuminate nothing more than a single word. Tucked away in the 8th century is the codex-aureus, a small, unassuming book that carries a colossal weight. It is considered the oldest book written in the German language, a humble survivor from a time when writing in any local tongue was a radical act. Its purpose was practical, not artistic. This was a glossary, a kind of dictionary designed to translate difficult Latin words into Old High German. Its illumination is modest, a far cry from the golden symphonies of later centuries, but its importance is immeasurable. The book is a linguistic fossil, capturing the first tentative steps of a written German language. Imagine the intellectual challenge facing the anonymous monk who compiled it. He had to find German equivalents for sophisticated Latin terms, often for concepts that had no direct parallel in his own culture. How you translate a word like sacrament or divinity into a language more accustomed to describing crops and weather? Each entry in the codex-aureus represents a small act of creation, a bridge being built between the learned world of the church and the spoken world of the people. The book's format is simple, a straightforward list pairing Latin with German, but its implications are revolutionary. It reveals a deliberate effort to make knowledge accessible, to begin the process of articulating complex thought in a native tongue. This makes the codex-aureus a cornerstone of German philology, the very bedrock upon which the entire history of the language is built. Its pages offer a different kind of illumination altogether. It is not the light of gold leaf or lapis lazuli, but the illumination of language itself, flickering to life on the page. A psalter could be a communal possession or a royal showpiece, but the scent. Albin's psalter was something far more intimate. This 12th century English book was crafted for one person alone, an anchoress named Christina of Marquiat, who lived a life of radical solitude and prayer, walled into a small cell adjoining a church. The book was designed to be her spiritual companion, a window to the divine in her confined world, and its pages thrum with a deeply personal energy. It is a complex compilation, uniquely binding together a liturgical calendar, a full cycle of 40 miniatures depicting the life of Christ, and the Psalms themselves, creating a complete spiritual toolkit for a life dedicated to devotion. The artist, believed to the scribe and painter, filled these pages with figures of astonishing emotional expression. Their faces are not serene masks. They register shock, sorrow, and joy with a raw, human immediacy that feels centuries ahead of its time. The colors are vivid and bold, from rich vermilion reds to deep lapis blues, making each scene leap from the page with a dramatic intensity meant to stir the heart of its solitary viewer. One of the most breathtaking illuminations is the Christ of the Choir's page. It presents Christ not as a distant judge, but as a vibrant, youthful teacher surrounded by concentric circles of adoring angels. The entire composition pulses with a rhythmic, almost musical energy, as if the page itself is singing. This is more than a picture, it was an invitation to join the eternal chorus of heaven, a direct visual link for Christina between her silent cell and the celestial liturgy. The exact circumstances of the Psalter's creation remain a subject of scholarly debate. Was it a gift from the abbot of St. Albans, Geoffrey de Gorham, who is known to be Christina's spiritual advisor? Or was it the work of a different, yet equally devoted, patron? This mystery only deepens the book's powerful aura, Every stitch of its binding, every stroke of its paint, was intended to foster a profound and direct connection between one woman and her God. The St. Albans Psalter is the ultimate bespoke object, a masterpiece of faith tailor made to guide a single soul through a life of extraordinary devotion. Gold is the color of divine light, and in the codex-aureus of Eadfrith, that light is poured forth with imperial splendor. Created in the 11th century at the Abbey of Eadfrith, this gospel book is a symphony of precious materials. Its pages do not simply contain text. They are radiant fields of gold leaf upon which the sacred words are written. The colors are not merely decorative, they are profoundly symbolic. Deep, costly lapis lazuli blue represents the heavens, while vibrant vermilion red signifies the blood of Christ and the fire of the Holy Spirit. Every hue was chosen to convey a theological truth, transforming the book into a catechesis of color. The artists filled these pages with majestic portraits of the four evangelists, each one depicted as a powerful, contemplative figure seated within a grand architectural framework. They are not just writers, they are sovereigns of the Spirit, their wide, intense eyes connecting directly with the viewer across the centuries. Their robes fall in heavy, deeply carved folds, a style that echoes the art of the Byzantine Empire, lending them an air of ancient and timeless authority. This imperial connection is made even more explicit in the intricate canon tables that precede the Gospels. These concordances, which cross-reference the narratives, are not simple lists. They are framed by elaborate arcades, miniature architectural structures of columns and arches that create the illusion of a sacred, physical space. To read these pages is to walk through a golden portico of a celestial palace, where every architectural detail reinforces the harmony and order of the divine word. This masterpiece was born in one of the most important scriptoria of the Holy Roman Empire. Eadfrith was a center of artistic innovation, and this book is the ultimate expression of its mission, fusing the classical grandeur and rich coloration of Byzantine art with the local Germanic love for energetic outline and expressive force. It stands as a physical testament to the power of imperial patronage, an object commissioned to visually proclaim the unity of church and state under a divine mandate. The Codex-aureus is more than a book. It is a portable cathedral, its golden pages serving as walls and its illuminated arches framing a space where emperor, monk, and God could meet. Across the sea in Denmark, another psalter was forging a spiritual identity with raw, graphic power. The Copenhagen Psalter is a mid-12th century masterpiece, a national treasure whose art does not whisper but shout. Its pages are a bold declaration of the Romanesque style, dominated by large, expressive figures that seem to vibrate with emotional intensity. These are not the graceful, naturalistic saints of later Gothic art. They are monumental forms, drawn with heavy outlines, and set against brilliantly colored backgrounds of lapis blue, emerald green, and fiery vermilion. The effect is less like a window into a scene, and more like a stained glass window transformed into a book, where every color and shape carries a symbolic weight. The true genius of this psalter lies in its highly original illustrations for the psalms themselves. The artists did not just provide generic decoration. They interpreted the poetic and often violent text in a startlingly literal, powerful way. When a psalm speaks of the Lord breaking the bow and snapping the spear, the illumination might show a divine hand physically shattering weapons in a burst of celestial light. If the text describes enemies surrounded, the image depicts warriors trapped within a tightening circle of shields. This direct visual translation makes the ancient songs feel immediate and visceral, as if the struggles and triumphs of King David were unfolding right there on the page. This book was far more than a beautiful object. It was a crucial instrument in the final Christianization of Scandinavia. At a time when the Old Norse gods were still a living memory, the Psalter presented the new faith with an undeniable visual force. Its dramatic art served as a catechism for the eyes, making the tenets of Christianity vividly clear and emotionally compelling. Yet for all its local importance, the Psalter also reveals Denmark's deep connections to the wider world. The artistic currents flowing through its pages, the robust figures, the love of pattern, the symbolic use of color, show clear influences from English, German, and French monastic centers. The Copenhagen-psalter is a powerful hybrid. It stands as a uniquely Danish expression of faith, while simultaneously proving that its creators were fully engaged in the vast, interconnected cultural networks of medieval Europe. In its bold pages, a newly Christian kingdom found its own voice, while proudly echoing the artistic chorus of a continent. A Book of Shadows emerges from the workshops of Bruges. The Black Hours is a manuscript that defies every expectation of medieval illumination, a volume where the night itself has become the page. Created in the late 15th century for a wealthy member of the Burgundian court, its most shocking feature is its very foundation. The vellum was not left its natural creamy white, but was meticulously stained a deep, velvety black, a color as rich and dark as a moonless midnight. Upon this profound darkness, scribes performed a kind of visual alchemy. The text of the prayers and psalms was inscribed not in black ink, but in shimmering silver, with headings and accents picked out in burnished gold. The effect is surreal and deeply nocturnal. The letters seem to float in a void, gleaming like constellations in an endless sky. The miniatures painted on these black grounds are even more startling. Saints and biblical scenes are rendered in the most brilliant, jewel-like colors, vivid crimsons, lapis lazuli blues, and emerald greens that seem to ignite against the darkness, glowing with an unearthly, internal light. This was not a gloomy book, but a spectacle of dramatic contrast, a permanent spiritual twilight captured between covers. Achieving this effect required incredible technical mastery. Painting on a dyed surface was notoriously difficult, as the black pigment could interfere with the adhesion of other paints and the precious metals. The artist had to work with a supreme confidence, laying down opaque colors that would stand vibrant against the dark ground without muddying or flaking away. Every brushstroke was a risk, and every successful page a testament to a workshop operating at the peak of its skill. This was an extreme luxury item, the pinnacle of a taste for the rare and exotic that defined the Burgundian elite. In a world of golden books, a black one was the ultimate statement of refined and rarefied taste, a conscious rejection of convention for something uniquely mysterious. It was a personal cosmos for its owner, a portable night sky where prayers were written in starlight and saints shone like divine apparitions. A frantic, visionary energy pulses from the pages of the Silos Apocalypse. Created in the late 11th century at the monastery of Santo Domingo de Silos in northern Spain, this manuscript is a firestorm of ink and pigment, one of the earliest and most dramatic illuminated commentaries on the Book of Revelation. Its art is not serene or contemplative. It is a visual panic attack, perfectly mirroring the cosmic chaos and divine fury of its source material. The illustrations are packed with action, the figures drawn with a raw, almost nervous line that seems to tremble with apocalyptic dread. Here, multi-headed beasts rise from the sea, their jaws agape. Plagues of locusts descend upon terrified humanity, and the dead are shown rising from their tombs under the gaze of a stern, judging Christ. The colors are bold and stark fiery reds, deep indigos, and earthy ochres, applied with a sense of urgency that makes the scenes feel immediate and terrifyingly real. This unique style is a direct reflection of the monastery's place in the world. Silos was a bastion of Mozarabic culture, a community of Christians living under Islamic rule in Al-Andalus. The artists who worked on this book were cultural synthesizers, weaving together a tapestry of influences that could only exist on the Iberian Peninsula. From Islamic art, they borrowed a love for intricate geometric patterns and decorative abstraction, visible in the textile like fill of backgrounds and garments. From their own Visigothic heritage, they retained a certain starkness and a preference for expressive, large-eyed figures. And flowing in from across the Pyrenees were the burgeoning currents of European Romanesque art with its heavier forms and narrative drive. The Silos Apocalypse is where these three worlds violently collide on parchment. The result is a book that feels both ancient and utterly unhinged, a prophetic nightmare filtered through a unique cultural lens. It stands as a powerful testament to the artistic innovation that flourished in the borderlands between faiths and kingdoms, a place where the end of the world was imagined with a fearful, brilliant intensity. The luttrell-psalter transforms a single letter into a crowded stage. Created in early 14th century England, this prayer book is a marvel of compressed storytelling, where the very first letter of a psalm often explodes into a full narrative sequence. The artist focused his genius on the life of King David, the legendary author of the Psalms, but he did not just illustrate key moments. Within the elaborate body of a single historiated initial, he packed multiple scenes from David's life, creating a visual comic strip that unfolds before your eyes. Take the letter B for the opening of Psalm 1. It does not hold one picture of the king. Instead, it might show David as a young shepherd boy tending his flock, then confronting the giant Goliath with his sling, and finally being crowned, all contained within the intricate curves and lines of that one magnificent character. This was a revolutionary approach to illumination. The reader was not just reading the sacred text, they were visually walking through the entire story that inspired it. This required immense artistic skill. The illuminator had to design these miniature worlds with the precision of a master architect, balancing multiple figures and actions within a very confined space, all while maintaining perfect clarity. Every tiny face, every gesture, tells a part of the story. The Psalter's deep connection to works at Priory suggests it was used by the Augustinian canons there as a focal point for their devotion. To meditate on these pages was to engage in a form of spiritual time travel, tracing the journey from shepherd to king as a mirror for one's own soul seeking God. This book stands as a breathtaking high point of English Gothic-illumination, where faith was not merely written, but vividly, dynamically performed within the golden frames of the alphabet itself. Our final book sings not of saints, but of students and their thirst for wine, satire, and song. The carmina-burana is a world away from the golden quiet of a gospel book. Discovered in the library of the Bavarian monastery of Benedict Bjorn in the 19th century, this 13th century codex is a chaotic, joyous anthology of 254 poems and dramatic text. This is not a book for the altar, but for the tavern. Its creators were the Goliards, wandering scholars and disaffected clerics who roamed the universities of Europe, trading their Latin learning for a hot meal and a full cup. They wrote with a scholar's precision and a rebel's wit, and their work provides the most vital, raucous counterpoint to the pious world we have explored. The manuscript's illumination is as spirited and unrefined as its content. Gone are the lavish gold leaf and precious pigments. In their place are lively, sometimes crude, pen and ink drawings that bustle in the margins. They depict a medieval world the formal manuscripts rarely show. Here, monks roll dice in a gambling den. Students raise overflowing tankards in raucous celebration. A fox in a bishop's robes preaches to a flock of geese, a biting satire of clerical hypocrisy. One famous illustration shows the Wheel of Fortune, a powerful reminder that fate could lift a peasant to a throne or cast a king into the mud. This was the raw, human side of the Middle Ages, where the pressures of a rigid, spiritual society created their own release valve. The poems themselves celebrate springtime, the fickleness of love, and the bitter disappointments of a life spent in poverty. They mock the powerful and lament the emptiness of a purse. The most famous of these songs, O Fortuna, was set to music centuries later, its dramatic tones capturing the same turbulent energy that pulses through these pages. The carmina-burana does not cancel out the profound beauty of the Book of Kells or the Très Riches Heures. Instead, it completes the picture. It reminds us that the medieval world contained multitudes. In the very same era, that monks were painstakingly illuminating the Word of God with liquid gold. These wandering scholars were using the same language, the same tools of pen and parchment, to immortalise the earthly, the profane, and the gloriously human. It is the other half of a conversation, a necessary rebellion that proves a culture is truly alive. From the abstract spirals of the Book of Kells to the courtly dreams of the Très Riches Heures, this journey has spanned a full millennium of human genius. These 25 books are far more than beautiful artifacts. They are complex historical documents, each a unique lens into the medieval mind. They reveal a world where deep spirituality coexisted with raw political power, where the solemnity of prayer was punctuated by laughter in the margins, and where boundless creativity flourished within the strict confines of vellum and belief. We have seen how these manuscripts encoded everything from the divine right of kings to the daily labors of a peasant, from the terror of the apocalypse to the joyful satire of wandering scholars. They are the ultimate time capsules, preserving not just sacred texts, but the very breath, dreams, and doubts of the people who made and used them. This legacy is not locked away. The vibrant details of these masterpieces are now at your fingertips. I urge you to seek out the digital facsimiles of these manuscripts online. Zoom in on the microscopic beasts in the Lindisfarne Gospels, trace the delicate grisaille of the Queen's tiny prayer book, or get lost in the golden arches of the codex-aureus. Explore them for yourself, and let these pages speak to you across the centuries. In the comments below, I would love to hear which of these illuminated books captivated you the most, and the story within its pages that you found unforgettable.